Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to tackle a really fascinating subject: defeating casino chaos with strict mathematical discipline. Look, if you've ever stood at a table game and wondered if there's a real method to the madness, beyond just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're decoding the exact strategies that professional players use to structure their wagers. We're drawing directly from the deep dive tutorials over at the Knowledge's Power channel to give you an absolute masterclass in even money betting systems.
Think of this explainer as your personal betting toolkit. We're going to start right at the foundation with mindset and discipline, and then we'll break down 4 very distinct approaches: the 3-stage system, John Patrick's strategy, the Hollandish strategy, and finally, the series strategy. Let's get right to it.
Section 1, Mindset and Discipline. Because honestly, without this, nothing else matters.
Here is the harsh reality. The most brilliant mathematical strategy in the world is completely useless without the right mental framework. 90 to 95%, that is the staggeringly high percentage of people who walk into a casino, hand over their cash, maybe enjoy a severely overpriced cocktail, and walk out with absolutely nothing. Why? Well, because the vast majority treat it as this emotional game of luck rather than a strict system of execution. To actually beat the chaos, you have to step out of that 95% and stop doing what literally everyone else around you is doing.
And this brilliantly illustrates the creator's core philosophy. Money is just a consequence if you do your job well. It's such a profound shift in perspective, right? Because if you're constantly obsessing over the profit, you're losing focus on the actual process. When you focus intensely on the execution, the knowledge, and the sheer discipline of your system, the profitability naturally follows. It's just a byproduct of doing things right.
To enforce that kind of discipline, we've got to lay down the absolute foundational rules for long-term survival, the don'ts. First up, do not chase your losses with massive bets. Trying to recover lost money by suddenly betting 5 or 10 times your normal unit size is just going to drain your bankroll at lightning speed. Second, don't blindly double your stakes using random, gimmicky YouTube tricks. Third, please don't fall into the trap of buying prediction software. It's a complete scam. And finally, never ever play without a strategy. Real knowledge really is the only final answer here.
Moving on to Section 2, the 3-stage system. This is all about structured compartments.
What makes this first framework so incredibly unique is how it neatly compartmentalizes your session based entirely on your wins and losses. You always kick things off in what's called the initial stage, which gives you a 3-level buffer to get a foothold. Now, if things go terribly wrong, you trigger a defensive phase called the stopping stage. But if things go perfectly, you graduate up into the making stage. This is an aggressive, open-ended phase designed strictly for riding those hot winning streaks. Let's actually look at the math on this.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the strict mathematical escalation depending on your bankroll. Let's say you start with a $5 base bet in the initial stage. You only escalate to $10 and then $15 if you lose. If you happen to lose all 3 of those, you drop down into the stopping stage, betting $20 and then $40. Your one and only goal in the stopping stage is to win just a single bet, which then immediately resets you back to a safer, lower level in the initial stage. It's a fantastic way to prevent wild emotional betting because it contains your losses into very specific, calculated tiers.
But what happens when you're winning? Well, that brings us to the making stage. To unlock this aggressive stage, you actually have to win 2 wagers in a row back at the initial stage. Do that, and you bump your starting bet up slightly, say from $5 up to $7. And here's the strict if-then logic you follow. If you win, you increase the next bet by 2 units. So your sequence goes $7, then you drop back to $5 to lock in some profit, then up to $6, $8, $10, and so on. But, and this is a huge rule, any loss instantly ends the making stage and resets you completely. You push hard on a streak for sure, but the very second it breaks, you defend your bankroll.
All right, Section 3, John Patrick's strategy. This one is all about locking in those profits. The system intentionally uses a mix of progressive and regressive betting to aggressively lock in profits while you're still sitting at the table. And it all hinges on one absolutely foundational rule. Your starting wager must be at least twice as large as the table minimum. So if you're sitting at a $5 table, you've got to start with $10. Why? Well, because you literally need the mathematical room to reduce the size of your bet after a win.
It is just brilliantly conservative. Think about it. If you win your $10 bet, your next wager is instantly cut in half, right down to $5. You've just safely locked $5 of pure profit into your pocket that cannot be lost on the next hand. Now, if you win that second hand, you revert to your larger starting bet and increase it if you keep winning. But take a look at the losing side. If you lose at any point in the system, there is zero chasing. You revert immediately back to your original starting bet, clean and simple.
If you lose 4 consecutive hands, the session ends. Period. No exceptions. You get up and walk away. Knowing exactly when to stop and protecting your bankroll from a total, catastrophic wipeout is a critical professional skill. It's honestly what separates that top 5% of winners from the 95% of losers.
Section 4. The Hollandish Strategy. This one introduces block evaluations. So this strategy takes a wildly different mathematical approach. Instead of reacting emotionally to every single hand, it forces you to evaluate your bets in specific, segmented blocks. To really get this, we first need to quickly define a negative progressive strategy. Basically, this is a betting system where your wager amount is mathematically increased following a loss, in an attempt to recover your previous deficits. Now, a lot of systems do this recklessly, doubling up infinitely until a player just goes entirely broke. But the Hollandish strategy, actually, scratch that, it's more like a mechanical brake on that risky philosophy.
Here is exactly how it applies that break. You don't mess around with your bet size after every single hand. Instead, you play a strict 3-hand block at the exact same wager amount. You only evaluate your bankroll after those 3 hands are completely finished. If your net profit for the block is negative, well, then you increase your bet by 2 units for the next 3-hand block. But if your profit is positive, even by just 1 single unit, you completely reset back to your initial lowest bet size. It's so smart because it limits volatility by forcing you to stick to a set bet size for 3 full hands, really smoothing out that wild roller coaster of wins and losses.
Finally, Section 5, the series strategy. This relies on fixed sequences. This final system strips away all the complex rules and relies entirely on a fixed, predetermined sequence of numbers: 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and 32. But instead of starting at the lowest number on the left like you might expect, the series system requires you to jump right into the middle. So in this case, your very first wager would be exactly 8 units.
So the crucial point is exactly how you move along this number line. It's this really elegant back and forth pendulum swing based entirely on the outcome of the hand. If you win your 8-unit bet, you move 1 step to the right, making your next wager 13. If you lose, you move 1 step to the left, dropping your wager down to 5. The series simply ends either when you win the highest bet all the way on the right, the 32, or when you lose the lowest bet on the left, the 2.
Look, to be completely objective here, no system is a magical ATM. And the creator of these tutorials issues a very honest, upfront warning about a specific mathematical flaw in the series strategy. Quote, alternating wins and losses at the higher level of wagers will destroy the profits, unquote. Because the numbers grow much larger as you move to the right, if you get stuck trading a win for a loss up near that 21 and 32 range, the math will slowly just grind your bankroll down to dust. It's an amazing strategy for a hot streak, for sure, but it's highly vulnerable to a choppy back-and-forth game.
Okay, we've covered a massive amount of ground today, from the rigid protective tiers of the 3-stage system to the conservative profit locking of John Patrick, the clever block evaluations of the Hollandish, and that swinging pendulum of the series strategy. So the question I want to leave you with today is this: which of these 4 disciplined systems best aligns with your personal risk tolerance? Remember, defeating casino chaos isn't about crossing your fingers and getting lucky. It's about choosing a structured path and flat-out refusing to deviate from it. The math is already on the table. The real question is, do you have the discipline to actually play it? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Since 2022, he's documented every session, tracked hundreds of live shoes every month, and followed the same proven principles with discipline. After more than 4 years, his conclusion was simple. It wasn't about finding another strategy. It was about mastering one approach, executing it consistently, and managing risk with discipline. That's the difference between someone who gambles and someone who operates like a professional. Stop chasing the next system. Start becoming the type of player who can consistently execute one. Knowledge is power.